might think about, it will still be about, creating a space for people, creating a campfire.
Clearly, a city is for people, no doubt about it, but what we are looking for is comfort. What we are looking for is ease of living. Most people who come to the cities are, of course, people who are looking for a livelihood, who are looking for comfort in living, who are looking for better quality of education or healthcare. So it's a holistic dream that each one had when they first migrated. As you rightly said, there were no cities to begin with, unless we believe in the Bahubali story where in the movie they set up a whole new city along the Ganges. But to my mind, if we can address the various human aspects starting from birth to death, and there's a very interesting anecdote around it. When Prime Minister Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he had commissioned a study and some youngsters had sat down and tried to assess how many different trades or professions touch a person's life from birth to death. And possibly in birth you can take pre-birth also and you can take post-death also. And the assessment was about 5,000. 5,000 different skill sets come in touch with a human person from birth to death. Now a city is all of that multiplied by probably so many number of people. So it's really more than the most complex machine that would possibly be there in the NASA labs or the European CERN laboratory. And therefore, in that sense, I think both are right. End of the day, the nerve center will have to be the human being. Happiness quotient is what we are all here for in any case. But how we are going to bring all of that infrastructure and all of the enablers to a better quality of life, to happiness, to ease of living, bring that all on the table, meshed into a beautifully running, well-oiled machine, which makes our life comfortable and easy to live. That's the city of tomorrow that we are all aspiring for.
You know, when you spoke about the campfire and you spoke about comfort and convenience and a certain order, I can't resist thinking of Simba and the Lion King, because the whole story there, and even Jungle Book, fire is a very good metaphor for safety, comfort, being together, generating light and everything. The reason I asked you about personal was, I saw so much emotion, because ultimately, if whatever we do, if the emotion is right, then the rationality comes in, and you were trying, sir, to bring in some order and rationality into it, because those two have to happily coexist. So I'll now delve into some paradoxes. When we try to build something for the future, when we try to create something constructive, it's the trinity, comes with construction, some destruction. So my next question to you, Carlo, technology is a buzzword, and you really tantalized us. Technology connects, but in my mind, I get very worried. Does it dehumanize or make it me more unsocial? Do I come back home to technology or to my family?
Okay, let me try to do two things. The first thing, I will try to reassure you a little bit, and then I will try to even increase your worries. So the first thing, I will try to reassure you in the short term. And I think the good thing is actually, if you think about technology, over the past few decades, technology has become much more usable. At MIT, we'll still have some old mainframe computers in the basement. That's a technology of the time of the Apollo mission. And it might be surprising to know that today, all of us, in our pockets, we've got more or less the same computing power that a lot of NASA had at the time of the Apollo mission, with a very big difference. At the time, you needed years and years of studies in order to learn punch cards and so on, in order to be able to control those computers. And today, the same amount of computing power, everybody can access it very quickly. You put it in the hands of a 5-year-old, a 95-year-old with a smartphone. So very quickly you learn how to use it and how to connect with other people, which is the key thing that we were saying, the key thing of a city, how you connect with others, how you connect with the world, with information, with books, and so on. So that's beautiful, and that's making technology much more accessible to all of us. Now, at the same time, the second part of the question is where I'm going to make you more worried is that we all know that this is going to have very big changes on society. And in the past, it was always the case that we would actually delegate something to machines, the things we didn't like, and then we would keep on doing other things. So, you know, like in the first industrial revolution, machines were doing a lot of physical things. We wouldn't do anymore, but then actually we do all the intelligent part on the side and so on. Now, we're getting close to a point where actually both machines and artificial intelligence are going to be better than us at almost everything. And then the question, which is the question some people, you know, put in the context of singularity, is the question then, you know, what are we going to do? Now, in the short term, again, it's going to be fine. In the next few decades, it's about, you know, just thinking about redistribution, thinking about, you know, transition, education of people during the transition. But there is something quite interesting, which is, you know, what happens when actually machines and artificial intelligence can do almost everything better than us. And then I think that's a question we should all be looking at carefully, and we should all discuss together, because, you know, many things could happen there.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, yesterday I saw, which is this movie Akshay Kumar ki abhi, Batman. And I think that says it all. Technology can be an enabler for better stuff. It can also be a deterrent for betterment of society. And in some sense, in that movie, I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to see it, but I was really delighted to see it. I really enjoyed it. Because truly, technology has to be relevant to your circumstances, to your country's needs. And what he has demonstrated in that is that we have a country of 1 billion plus people. We have at least 500 million people who need sanitary pads. But technology and the fancy machines around it have made that pad very unaffordable for more than 70% or 75% of the women of the country. And that man, as shown in the movie, in his quest to take care of his wife, his sister's health, makes every effort and then finally creates a machine which costs only 90,000 rupees to make a sanitary pad of reasonably or almost the same level of hygiene and quality. And I believe it's based on an actual story of a person down south called Murgeshan or something. And Murgeshan has been providing these pads for as low as 2 rupees. And helping the poor, helping the villagers also get the benefit of proper hygiene, proper health care. Now, I had, for example, the ambassador of the US this afternoon. And he, in the course of discussions, he was talking about high tech, and while India is emerging into the new age, we have this to offer and that to offer. And I told him, look, gentlemen, while I'm very happy to engage with the most modern technology, wherever essential, I also have to keep in mind that my per capita income is $1,800. Yours is $60,000 or thereabouts. I can't have everybody pay the kind of value that a person would pay on an SLR train between Washington and New York. The same person, probably Anand or I, in Washington will pay a certain value for that journey. But in India, for that same journey, if we were asked to pay an equivalent value, we'd blow our head off, or we'll say we'd rather fly. It's also our own mindset and our ability as a nation, or the values at which we work. I said, what I need is outcomes. If the outcome takes me to what I want, so my destination, if I can reach safely, fast, with reasonable security, comfort, then I'd rather not look for a BMW, I'd look for a Beetle or maybe a Maruti car.
Or a Mahindra.
Or a, I'm sorry. Or a Mahindra electric vehicle.
Touche.
But very clearly one has to have technology which is relevant to situation and circumstances. So if we try to impose, let's say, technologies which are going to dim the lights in this room automatically, and it adds to the rent of this room by 10,000 rupees. That's a very vague example I'm giving. Then the management is obviously going to see whether it's worth it, Or in the Indian context, we'll have a person who dims it for 15, 20,000 rupees. And maybe the marketability of this room will increase. We'll have more clients willing to pay, and different price points do matter in India. So I think technology should be taken for outcomes and relevance. While at the same time, where technologies have a deep, huge outcome, for example, we introduced the LEDs. Now somebody could have argued that LEDs cost 500, 600 rupees. Why are you promoting LEDs? But there it was a conscious call that with economies of scale, with honesty in purchase, we were confident the price will come down. And the cost benefit was very evident. The people of India would save thousands and thousands of crores using LEDs. So when the outcome is significant and can be seen, get the best of technology, don't compromise. But always keep it relevant to your purse and to the outcomes and needs of the people of the country.
So I'll delve a little more on this subject of the paradox of technology, and I'll bring in Mr. Mahindra into the conversation because I have had a privilege of interacting a little more with him. That he talks about a city with a soul. He likes technology, he uses it very often and very well. So I am trying to grapple in my mind, technology, soul, affordability, accessibility, convenience, all play a very important role. I'm still not able to resolve, do I go back to Alexa or do I go back to Anushrita at home? So how does the future of tomorrow look to all of us? Anushrita is my daughter.
I was going to ask you.
No other
I
intentions.
just thought you were rebranding Alexa.
Because we have to rebrand things for this country as well. We have to adapt, to make things adaptive for this country, as the minister made it very clearly. So how do these all dichotomies coexist? Do you see some challenges and concerns?
So let me tell you, right now, I see Anusritas at home saying, "Hey Alexa, when is mommy coming back?"
She's actually here in Delhi today.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm telling you this not in a light-hearted manner. That reconciles the dichotomies to me. In a sense, I'm paraphrasing what the minister said. What are you using that technology for? Look, first of all, whenever people ask that generic question that, is technology destroying our lives? It's a complex answer, but I try to find the answer by making things black and white. So would you rather have something or not? Any one of us that's had a relative who's been unwell in an emergency situation, you ask them at that point whether they would do without the mobile phone and what it means to them at that point in time. Or maybe something less grim. I've just become a grandfather, for example. My grandson lives in New York. I spent half an hour last night on FaceTime hearing him cooing. If somebody took away my iPad, I would murder them right now, okay? So don't ask me about whether that technology is intruding in my life. FaceTime is my link to my humanity. And I'm putting it that starkly. So again, let me just say what the minister said. What are you using it for? How do you use it before you start vilifying something? It's like the Force, going back to Star Wars. The Force can be with you, it can be with Darth Vader. The question is, how are you going to use it? So my view on technology is very clear. And going back quickly to your question about a soul, I think looking on outcomes, if we want to create engagement, you've done a marathon now at Mahindra World City. It's very interesting, Piyushji, that when we built Mahindra World City, Chennai, we did it like a computer game, like SimCity. You know, we are building it and we say, here, you remember SimCity? I don't know whether you're too young to remember it, Carlo. So I used to use it, you know, as a student. And you say, here goes the live part, here's the work, here's the play, and we're going to build the houses. Anyway, we are done. We forgot that a city needs magic. It needs a soul. It needs engagement. Since then, what Sangeeta and her team have been doing is trying to inject that. That's their priority. So what was their priority? Creating the Mahindra World City Marathon. You've got, what, 3,000 people?
4,000.
4,000 people participating, not only from the city. They come from around South India. So suddenly there is a personality to the city. We had forgotten that element because in that game they didn't put down magic. They didn't put down personality. So again, I think when technology serves magic, I think there's no contradiction at all.
Thank you. I'm really relieved. and Anushrita can go on using her technology to because the reason was to find out a solution for her.
Can I
It's
make
very
a
personal.
small
Yes, please.
addition to that? I was just telling Anand in the room before we came in. I was in a small village outside Belgaum, which is now more popularly known as Belgavi. I was doing a couple of programs there. Then I met with the women, I met with the children. The happiness on their face, the soul that you're talking of, is to die for. You can't see that in our cities anymore. The joy, the way they met you, it was so pleasurable. I can't even explain it. In fact, I made a comment in my address there. I said that all of us are all the time reading books and preparing policy, how we can take urban India to rural India. Honestly, we need to bring rural India to urban India and the heart of rural India to urban India. Having said that, we can't wish away technology. It's there. And what Anand said is right, whether it's a person in an emergency, a doting grandfather, it's us in government multitasking with so many things, or anybody for that matter. And by the way, Anand, if you had told us this earlier, that you were playing with SimCity and that's got you over here, all of us would have played with SimCity when we were kids. But having said that, what I was trying to lead to was that we can't have such a large section of people in the country who are alienated from what is happening in the technology world. We'll have to quickly, all of us, put our heads together, see what can be done so that, just like there was that argument about net neutrality, I think the time has come for us to discuss technology neutrality. Can 1.3 billion people in India also benefit from these new technologies? Can they become more affordable for people in the remotest parts of the country to also get the look and feel of an iPad or of what's happening in the world? And actually, for that matter, even in the United States, I've heard of people who have not gone out of their town. A whole life lived in a small town and they've never traveled out. But with technology, now they are exploring the world. Similarly, I think we need to take all of this to the interiors of India so that that child who's been deprived of this, he also sees what's happening in the world. And I promise you, from out of all these children, if we were to connect them with technology, you may have an Einstein coming out, or maybe a very, very successful mathematician coming out, or you may find some good cinematographer who may not have studied at Harvard filmmaking, but may still be able to produce a very beautiful film. So I think we need to, all of us, seriously address this issue of making technology available at the rudimentary level, at the basic level. And today an iPad or basic Wi-Fi or internet is rudimentary.
Yep.
In fact, the Minister, sir, is very perceptive, because the topic which was grappling my mind was inclusivity. And in your own way, you have used technology as a metaphor for inclusivity. So the question I have in my mind is, which I've been thinking about, is we all talk about migration. Today also some people spoke about it. We speak about rural-urban divide. I see technology and many other facets as the world is, somewhere the barriers are becoming stronger, somewhere the barriers are crashing. As a person in the governing arena, do you see a meaningful agenda for leveraging various things like technology into making a unified state where urban and rural leverage each other, and I create what I call is a millennial who is neither urban nor rural? It's taking another thought forward so that we can bring the country to I'm just stepping back a little and not just talking about cities. Do you see a meaningful agenda on that?
Well, I think there's huge possibilities. I've just started on a project which I'll share with you, in which in a small, humble way, I'm hoping to do exactly what I articulated earlier. To make the Indian railways safe, I'm planning to bring in the most modern signaling system to the entire railway network in India, which will mean 118,000 line kilometers of railway will have a European ETCS signaling system. By the way, the entire world today has only 20,000 kilometers of that. We are embarking on a plan to do 6 times that in the next 6 years. And all the 6 suppliers first told me this is ridiculous, it can't be done. So when I told one of them, okay, you're free to leave the room, I'll talk to the other 5, he said, no, but I'll be participating, I want to do it. And today India is looking at such challenging tasks. Can we be better than the best in the world? But look at the concomitant advantages I get out of that. Because I need to set up a signaling system, I need Wi-Fi across the whole network. Once I need Wi-Fi, then I won't wait for 6 years. I'll start with Wi-Fi. Getting Wi-Fi across the length and breadth of India, because we have 8,000 plus stations all over the country and our trains go everywhere. Once I'll get Wi-Fi in, I'll do 2 things. One, I'll wire up the entire trains that carry passengers and every station with CCTV cameras, making train travel safer, particularly for women, children. I'll be able to address the issue of human trafficking significantly, because artificial intelligence will help me detect if any young girls or young child or even a young lady is seemingly uncomfortable, is not a normal passenger. And I believe that I'm told artificial intelligence can help us assess whether somebody is a lost child, a lost traveler, something like that movie of Kareena Kapoor and Shahid. Which one was that? I love that movie. Jab We Met.
Jab We Met.
I think my kids and I must have seen it about 30, 40 times by now. And the last part of this link, 8,000 plus stations, I'll have Wi-Fi on them. And I'll open it up to the villagers in the entire vicinity. And every villager, by and large, knows his nearest railway station in India. So I'll open it up. I'll get companies like Mahindra, give me a list of all the places where you have Mahindra establishments. And I'm serious about it.
You first buy the car, then I'll tell you.
What I'm planning is that I've already talked to CII, by the way, and you were past president CII, if I'm not mistaken. I've already talked to CII. I've offered them that all your members have establishments all over the country, and wherever you don't have, we'll push it through our PSUs. And in all these stations, I will set up the infrastructure taking Wi-Fi, because I need it for my signaling and CCTV cameras. And you send your person there with the equipment, maybe a printer, some iPad, some computers, goes in the morning, sets up shop on my Wi-Fi kiosk or whatever I'll create. And we'll invite young boys and girls, women, farmers to come and use that through the day, free of charge. We'll pay for the entire bandwidth and everything. The CSR component of the private sector will help manage it, because I believe they'll manage it better than my people sitting there. And I'm trying to struggle whether they were on duty, they were not on duty, this, that. He'll send somebody from his nearest factory to that station. I mean, I talked to a cement manufacturer. He said, I have 20 plants. I said, how many stations near your plants? He said, 30 or 40. I said, would you handle 30 or 40 stations, this facility? He said, happily. He said, it will help me get good people. And then those kids can explore the world. They can see what's happening all over the technology space, new areas of, after all, even in Padman, by the way, he gets the breakthrough because a small child opens up on internet how the sanitary pad is manufactured in the machine. So really, technology can do wonders. We just need to take it to the people of India. So I think inclusive development can be dovetailed with our routine development agenda.
Very, very comforting, because that makes for a better tomorrows, urban or rural and urban. It's actually, Carlo, you I think are bracing to say something about the subject.
No, but I think, this is very interesting. Actually, we had some of this conversation. We were on the same panel in Davos 2-3 weeks ago. And, there's really, how can you make solutions that really they start from the community? And to me, this one about, how you can bring Wi-Fi in a different way here than you would do in other countries, I think is very interesting. So how can you actually start from the local condition in order to do this? The other thing that I heard before that I thought was very, very important is about education. And there's no doubt that we cannot use the educational model we have today in order to scale it up to the entire planet. And if you think about the billions of people who could be Nobel Prize winners today on the planet, but actually don't get a chance to get there, don't get a chance to to learn and then to follow a path as they could in under other conditions, I think to me is one of the biggest challenge. And I believe, personally believe, and many people at MIT believe that in the same way that digital disrupted many industries, think about media industry, the music industry, all of them over the past 20 years have been totally redefined by new tools. But we think that education might be next, and so hopefully we'll be able to have more affordable education that, yes, will be able to give a chance to what I would call the rough diamonds. All these rough diamonds across the planet who could be potentially Nobel Prize winners, but today don't have a chance.
But Carlo, her question on rural-urban migration, where do you stand on that?
On the other point, on rural-urban migration, I think it's a very interesting question. There's a couple of things. One is that there was a Harvard professor from the past century called Zip, and he discovered actually something that hasn't been disproved so far in any country, in any historical period, is actually the proportion of bigger cities and smaller cities, even smaller cities. So the distribution of the population across cities of different sizes, from big metropolises to villages, is something that's quite constant. And that comes from the fact that, that the city has this kind of fractal nature. So we maybe move to a small village, and then, we might move to bigger cities, but then usually there's also something, younger people tend to move to bigger cities, and then later in life you tend to move back to a small village, to a place, the city is a place that maximizes opportunity, and then you want to move there in different times of your life, or when you are looking for new jobs, and then sometimes you want to move the other way from a big city to a smaller village. So I would say that what is happening today is that technology is redefining, in general, our experience of living in the built environment. Many of the things we discussed today, think about mobility, they apply to a big city or a small city. So I think the impact is going to be similar, and I think the way we will distribute the population between big city and small city, I believe will continue to be following zip flow, following what we've seen now for a long time in many countries, in many civilizations, in the past, in the present, and so on. So I think that, but the bottom line is that I think that, so we'll keep on having big cities, small city, villages, and metropolises, and all of them are going to be touched by this revolution of Internet of Things, by all the changes we've been talking about today.
Well, it's an issue where you and I and all of us will have no choice. There's going to be a natural migration, and there will be growing cities, and actually in some sense also cities will get unwieldy, because I don't see in the near future our ability to provide the kind of infrastructure that's required in 600,000 villages, enough opportunities for growing families to survive on small incomes in the villages. Also, with the declining share of agriculture in the GDP, more so because agriculture with some more mechanization or better productivity is going to lead to less and less people engaged in that. We will have a natural flow into cities. I personally have been of the opinion now for about 17 years. It was in 1999, 18 years, that I gave a paper to the then Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, where I had suggested that while we are trying to improve our cities and do some good about it, India should learn from the Chinese model and possibly create 100 completely new cities, like your Mahindra World City that you've attempted, where we can really look at a holistic development for a planned city, a city without slums. So even the construction labor, you are ensuring that while construction is going on, there'll be quarters built for them. So probably that'll be the first thing you'll invest in. Cities where you'll have planned roads, planned density, proper domestic quarters for domestic help, where we'll have, as you said, the proper public transport, living, eating, working, recreation, the entire gamut. I think we should all of us think whether, and in some sense the SEZ policy at that time had come out of that paper in 99. I think 2001, 2002, we came out with the SEZ policy. Over a period of time, sadly, while Mr. Vajpayee had approved only 3 SEZs, Pusitra in Gujarat, something in down south, possibly one in the, no, only 2. 2 were approved by the NDA, 1. The next few years, we actually diluted this concept to say that even if you had 25 acres, you could get an SEZ approval. And in that process, this concept of new cities got diluted to a tax tool or a tax planning tool. Makes me feel sad, but really, as a nation, if we can even now think in terms of, or some of the smaller towns can become, can be better developed, we may find more traction, but it's unavoidable that people are going to move from the villages to the cities. Even that same village where I went near Belgavi, I could feel that the sheer number of people there were disproportionately high to what I would imagine that area would need. And therefore, this is irreversible. And as my late father used to say, we must also recognize there's a lot of poverty in many of these villages. It's not as if they all come out of choice. Many of them really can't have 2 square meals or have a good, decent income in the villages. So they do come to the cities. The reality is in the cities, nobody dies of hunger. All said and done, you'll get some opportunity or the other to make 2 ends meet, to get a couple of square meals. You may be able to send some amount home, and that some amount also is very valuable. So I think we should accept that there'll be more people into the cities. Unless we plan faster and better now, it's going to be, you can't stop that migration. There's not a communist state or something where you can stop that migration. And necessity also will draw them to the cities. Let's plan better. That's going to be the important thing.
If I may, just on this, since you've been objective and realistic enough to say that this is inevitable, Shirish, who's right here, from McKinsey, there are knowledge partners here. You mentioned in your session, Shirish, about the fact that most governments around the world are funding cities. Now, you had proposed that there should be a particular percentage of GST that goes in. Right now, India does not fund its cities at all. Am I right?
Only through missions, but not directly.
So is there any chance, Minister, of, given the reality that you recognized, what is the ability for the government to say, these are not bastions for the elite? We have to change our thinking and say, these are gateways to growth. And how do we get central governments to fund cities?
It's not that I'm a storyteller, but I'll tell you a little story associated with this which will answer your question. You remember Dr. Sumantra Ghoshal?
Of course.
99, I had given this paper to Mr. Vajpayee. It was June 99. And at the turn of the millennium, from 28 December to 3rd Jan, Professor Nitin Noria booked that entire journey, you know, that train journey, which goes from Delhi to Jaipur, Udaipur, all over Rajasthan, and I think it also went to Sabarmati, Ahmedabad and Somnath. So there are 2 trains in those days. This one was Gujarat and Rajasthan, the 7-day journey. So we spent 7 days with only professors of colleges and schools in Europe and America. Nitin had invited all his colleague professors. Sumantra Ghoshal was one of them. I was probably the only non-professor family there, Nitin's parents, and Geeta was there. During that journey, I articulated this paper which I had given to Mr. Vajpayee and the concept of SEZ in the Indian context and the need and what I was thinking. Just about 1 day before the journey got wound up, Sumantra, Nitin and I were sitting, and Sumantra said, Piyush, remember one thing in your life. If you want to make this program a success, keep the government out of it. If the more and more you try and get the government to do this program and run this, it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, the only caveat is, give us your money, you can stay out of it. No, jokes apart, I learned something, so I was just wondering that how do governments fund this and what is the logic they do? I just thought
it'll only lead to scandals, create problems on the ground, court cases, right starting from the land acquisition. what land acquisition the private sector can do privately and directly, mutually, the government cannot do.
But Carlo, what is happening in the do you know of this whole funding of cities? How does it work in Europe and the US?
Yeah. So I think I think there's truth on both sides of the arguments, because on the one hand, you certainly want to build infrastructure that has to be done with public funding. So, it can be the national government, it can be the local government, but the only way you can do some basic infrastructure in cities, you need that. At the same time, it is true that the cities usually, like the cities that work best are the ones that develop in this kind of bottom-up way, by actually following citizens and so on. And in many cities today, they are putting together these kind of two different components, two fighting elements, by actually having the government funds, but leaving the allocation to citizens. So actually citizens can participate, can take part into participatory budget, can say where they want the money spent, they can control the money, they can keep an eye on the money to see exactly where it went. A lot of the big data, open data initiatives allows you to track the money, every dollar spent, did it go in the right place? So I think there's no doubt that some funding has to come from all of us, and that's usually through taxes, collected by governments at different levels. But then I think what we can do today, thanks also to new technologies, is to engage citizens more in order to decide how we want that money spent. So citizens should have a say then in determining how they want their city tomorrow.
Sorry.
There will be competing demands on government resources, which are always scarce in a developing country like India. So frankly, that will be a non-starter. If we expect that the government starts with creating the infrastructure for a new city. In my humble opinion, and which was a part of, it was just a 1.5 page, it's on my website, or I'll mail it to you today. What I had suggested in that was the government allows the planning authority to be independent, to be run by the local person who's setting up that special zone. And that planning authority then imposes a nominal or a moderate tax, which would be more efficiently collected and spent locally, rather than government collecting the taxes and giving it back to you. And usually these things run best when there is an anchor. And no better example than Jamshedpur for all of us. Jamshedpur had the anchor of a steel plant, and from there the city developed. And I'm told it's a beautiful city even now, very well managed, very well organized, taxes are low, facilities are good for the residents of Jamshedpur. I wouldn't know what's the latest situation. Maybe one of these days you and I can go there and have a look at it.
She's ex-Tata Steel. She's from
Jamshedpur. So you could probably tell us about
Jamshedpur. So Jamshedpur is extremely beautiful. The water there is treated, and no one has a water purifier at their homes. And but the other dichotomy is you just get out of Jamshedpur. So the station is not owned by, as in not managed by.
I'll hand it over to you, Tata's tomorrow. No, that's a sad reflection. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but this is a sad reflection that if Tata's has such a large, no comment on any individual company, but I'll say Mahindra's. If Mahindra's has such a large presence near some place, he should be suo moto be thinking in terms of developing that station, beautifying it, making it run well, look well, all of that.
But it's really a benchmark city, we agree.
But anyway, by the way, I'm taking up all these stations for redevelopment.
Lovely. In fact, I would just like to tell you, Minister Sir, the train station at Mahindra World City, Chennai, we took an initiative and we went to the railways and we maintain it and we renovate it.
We have a model.
That's the
So
answer.
that's because
I'll
that's a
have that
gateway to my
studied also.
city. 30,000 people every day commute through that.
I've been to Mahindra City too.
I know you went for the
It was
biogas.
beautiful, yeah.
I remember that, sir. Carlo, we are all emotional about our country. Get a detached outside in view and tell us what we need to do better. 2 things for our urban ecosystems.
Well, first of all, let me say I've been to India many times. I really like the way things happen here, and they usually happen one of the reasons is really they happen much more in a bottom-up way. Before it was mentioned, the way the minister mentioned the way of doing things in China. China is really top-down. And yes, in the short term, perhaps we can be faster if you do top-down, but you also can do big mistakes. It is, as you know, there's a lot of ghost cities being built. They were built with top-down initiatives, and now they are kind of empty, a lot of empty real estate that you do when you take that approach. So I think what is very, very interesting here, I think, is the fact that a lot of things, a lot of changes happen in this kind of bottom-up way. And to me, that's the best lab for innovation. So I would actually leverage this kind of natural way of doing things in a bottom-up way in order to create a rich innovation ecosystem. Because ultimately, that's what's going to define tomorrow's unicorns and tomorrow's big urban innovators. So I think, starting from this, which is really part of the DNA of India, and leveraging it could actually position the country at the forefront of urban innovation.
Thank you. I'm going back to my beginning, because when you close it all together, it's nice to have a 360 view on the subject. You all spoke about your personal vision. Now, as institutional leaders, I would pose this question to Minister Sir and to you. What would you do to make a city in India or an urban center in India which can become a benchmark for the developing countries of the world for tomorrow? What would you do?
Of late, while one would have so many plans, the Honorable Prime Minister had asked me to look at Banaras and some of its pressing issues. So I had an occasion to spend some time there and make a few visits. Banaras is the oldest living city in the world today, more than 5,000 years old. I'm given to understand that there's no living city today, a vibrant, living 1.3 million people city, which is as old as Banaras. It has a lot of significance to many, many people of all hues and cry. Now, when I was looking at Banaras, it really, at the beginning, it looks like there's no hope. You can't do anything in that city. And entrenched interests, the muck all around, it was unbelievable. One of our most holy cities where many of us here would have a lot of religious connect. A city where at one point of time, maybe even now, many people believe that they would like to die in that city. That's how it had become positioned. A city which is in a way the most cosmopolitan city in the country. It has people from every state in the country. So the dharamshalas there, the places of worship there address literally every corner of the country. And one of the first and biggest challenges there was garbage. And in the Swachhata rankings, and now we have an independent, I think Adil Zainul by QCI run a quality ranking of cleanliness. Banaras was about 430 or thereabouts. 430 in a ranking of maybe 500 cities. And we kept struggling. We tried door-to-door collection of garbage. We tried so many things. The needle just wouldn't move. But then when we did the root cause analysis of why this is not making any difference, and why is the garbage still ultimately, end of the day, either coming on the street or into the Ganga, into the Ganges, we realized that 6 years ago, a waste processing plant was set up. There are 2 landfills. One is totally full, so if you try to put any more trucks there, the local villagers will burn that truck. The second landfill had a waste processing plant, which never started. It's all set up there. It had 200 vehicles with no tires, with nothing, no machine, nothing, just shells. Not Mahindras. Just lying there because they never ran for a single day, maybe just purchased. And in a way it reflected the apathy of government, that they had a fight with the contractor, never did anything, and just everything left half-built. I sent the NTPC officials to go there. Of course, at the first instance, they were aghast. They said, this is not our job. I mean, what are we going to do in a waste processing plant? I said, this is not your job, but this is national duty, right? We are trying to see what could solve a problem. In 3 months, power engineers who have nothing to do with that kind of machinery, but basically engineering skills, they got that whole plant up and about. And we started moving the garbage to the processing plant and would make compost out of it. I personally visited many times, and I tell you, it's a nightmare to visit a place like this. It's not easy. And lo and behold, we started processing 650 tons of garbage every day at that plant. And the impact it had on the city of Banaras is that its Swachhata ranking is now in the top 40 or so. From 400 something to the top 40. Still not the best of cities. It's of course a relative ranking. But I'm just trying to show that if we sit down and apply our mind to what can be done, you can transform any city, any urban space. I'm in dialogue with some very eminent architects who are helping me redesign the stations. And I tell you, we were always looking at stations, railway stations in silos. One station and then the next. An architect came up with a design the other day, which is to die for. He just, I saw you had one of the sessions connecting the dots. He just connected the dots and connected the stations on a Google map in the country, in the city of Mumbai. And he came and gave me a presentation, including a walkthrough, which 30 young architects in his office, all youngsters, all with different types of beards. Each one had a different beard than the other. You know, like the types you see in FTII. I mean, young guys, very, very nice. It was nice to see each one. I actually got into a discussion about why they all had these different, and why one of them was clean shaven. But that's the argument we have with Dhruv all the time, you know, how to persuade him to get his. But believe me, by connecting all those stations and making them one design for all the stations, he's given such a transformational idea that we could actually change the look and feel of Mumbai with that one idea. I think so. I'll unveil it at an opportune moment. But believe me, there's talent in India which is to die for. We just need to give them a chance to flourish, to explore.
Very good.
Come on.
Any thoughts from your side?
Since you're running out of time, why don't we ask Carlo your last question?
Okay, Carlo, any thoughts? How can we become role models?
I think what I like about what the minister said is really about is about more, instead of thinking about a new city from scratch. We know that it's very difficult to do a new city from scratch. I think Chandigarh is a very interesting example, but it took a long time for Chandigarh to start working. It was designed in 1950, I believe, or now 60 years ago, over 60 years ago. When it was designed as a city for cars in a country that at the time didn't have cars. So I think it took a long time to adjust to the new reality. So it's very difficult. If you look at Brasilia as well, built from scratch, for many years it wasn't really working as expected. So what I like about the last comment is it's really more about, instead of thinking like do a new city top down from scratch, think more about incrementally, how you can improve the cities we have. So look at how to make them cleaner, how to change mobility, how to do the stations. So I think that's the right approach. It's the approach of taking the infrastructure we have, and little by little, perhaps in collaboration with the public sector, the public and private sector, try to improve it. So I think that's probably the lessons for the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The conversation was exhilarating, so I think we, as usual, ran out of time. When you have conversations which are so compelling, but the audience here with bated breath, and I must thank the audience have been waiting patiently. So we would open the audience, 5 questions. Please be specific. Name yourself. Yes, Sheila. And can someone go with the mic there? Sheila is our architect friend. She has done a lot of work for Mahindra University, Chennai also. And she's doing work on inclusion.
We are looking for architects in the railways. I hope if there are more architects in this room, please register. We're really looking for good architects.
I was really happy. Mr. Anand Mahindra's as well as the minister's thing. But what occurred to me was that all of us, when we think of our cities and when we think of our own city to own and to have a soul, as she said, I think there is a certain scale to which a city can be. But unfortunately, what is happening now is the Delhi is become the NCR region and Chennai is following suit to make it bigger. And there is this ever expanding, scope for a city. It cannot go on like that. For planners and designers, I speak for my fraternity, you have to have an area for which you can design. It cannot be unending. It cannot be an imponderable. So technology as far as technology goes, scalability is very easy. And you know, bringing places together and cutting short distances is very easy. But at what cost? I think we will lose that comfort of around your campfire that you said, and the comfort that the minister said, and the identity. So coming from India and coming from such a diverse culture, I think it is very important for us to redefine what we think is the size, optimum size of a city first, and go really very strictly on that to see that maybe a region could be multiple cities, because I cannot think, for example, in Bombay, people in Colaba cannot relate with people in Ghatkopar. They don't have the same, they don't own it the same way, they don't feel for it the same way. So I think at this forum, I would dare to ask the minister to please look at this and say that there has to be a certain
We are
size
a democracy,
scale.
madam. This will not really run. This will not work.
No, you could have modules.
These are
is part-
modules. You assume. I remember I grew up in a place in Mumbai. It's called Sion. It was the real name is behind Shiv. The place is Shiv, and that's the end of the city limit. So at that point of time, the city ended there.
Yes.
Those 7 islands or whatever else. And this is, I'm not talking that old. I'm not that old also. Right? So the city was technically ending there, but then it grows.
But then
And the
that's only-
city is bound to grow and grow
Yep,
further.
yep.
So now we have a Mumbai-Pune corridor, which is going to be one city. I promise you that. Delhi, Gurgaon is now one city and going further and further. Today, Manesar, I don't know where else it will go. This is nature. And in a democracy, people are going to come, land values will increase in a particular place, people will move out, and then land values will fall, which is happening in South Mumbai today. Today, Nariman Point has collapsed, and BKC is becoming the new center. Who knows, a few years later, Thane may become a new center. Borivali already has very high prices, if you know Mumbai. And the same, you pay an arm and a leg to get a place in DLF at Gurgaon, probably far more than many parts of Delhi. So, Gurugram rather. So I think this is natural evolution. A good planner has to keep pace with time. I mean, sitting in government, I cannot say, look, I cannot plan for more than 1.25 billion population. Somebody tried to do that, we saw what happened.
The young man there.
Sir, I am Ashok Goel. Today, Minister said that 11 million housing shortage is there in the country. And in the next 5 years, he intend to get rid of this shortage. It means that 2.2 million houses we have to build every year. But I don't see any seriousness from the government to build 2.2 million houses every year. Could you please elaborate? Can we have the help of the private sector like Mr. Mahindra
But
Group?
government doesn't plan to build these houses at all. You are under a mistaken impression, sir. The government can only play the role of a facilitator. Towards that end, we have two responsibilities. One, to help people get finance, for which, at least for the affordable housing category, for a loan up to 6 lakh rupees, and most of India, and most of Indians would be looking at that level of loan. We give a 6.5% interest subvention, interest subsidy for a 15 or 20-year loan. I think nowhere in the world is any government giving that kind of an interest subvention for a small house for a poor person or a lower middle class person. For a house which is slightly larger with a loan component up to 9 lakhs, we give a 4% interest subvention for a similar 15, 20-year loan. And a house which is 12 lakhs, where the loan is up to 12 lakhs, 3%. So broadly about 36,000 rupees annually in the first year and then reducing balance. We are giving as an interest subvention to encourage people to own their home. As we walked in, I was telling ma'am that I have a plan that in the next 12 months, I want to encourage 1.3 million railway workmen and 350,000, 3.5 lakh coal workmen that work for me directly, forget all the other contractual workers, own their own house. And when I shared this with the union leaders, they were exhilarated. They said, nobody in 70 years has thought about it. I said, I will not give you a single rupee. I will not make the homes. I will not tell you go and buy from Mahindra or from somebody else. But my officers can play the role of a catalyst, can help you see that the legal documents are right, the RERA registration is okay, the bank loan is at a good price. I can negotiate with a bank maybe and get a 0.5% less on the basic interest plus 6.5 or 4%. So we can play the role of a catalyst. And the second thing we can do, which is really in the domain of states, but under the ease of doing business, we are working with the states. And that's where we've set up competition among cities and states to make it easier to get approvals. So this is the two things we can do. End of the day, we believe a privately run program on affordable housing for all will be far more successful than a government-initiated one where the houses would have leaking taps or bad quality construction. Why do you want to go down that path at all? And then irregularities in allotment.
Right.
You have every way to go wrong.
Hari, would you like to? Just give it.
Should actually have Chatham House rules in these kind of sessions.
My question is to Mr. Minister. My name is Hari Hegde and I work for Wipro. These are ballpark numbers. Going by 2011 census, it's about 300 odd urban people living in India. And if you go down the most populous cities, 10 cities make for 30% of Indian urban population. 10 cities, I'm sure of that number. And so it's about fixing those 10 cities. If you do that, you've fixed about 30% of Indian urban issues. Now, the gentleman from McKinsey, he was referring to three things. So I'm going to go back to it if you would permit. He was referring to not building new cities. He was referring to funding of existing large cities. And the rationale was that about 65% of the GDP comes from there, 95% of tax collection comes from there, but the allocation to cities is not adequate, point one. Second, the governance of those cities. Take, for example, Bangalore. The mayor has a tenure of 1 year. What can he do in that 1 year? So will we fix the mayoral system, which is a political question, because if you are going to have a strong mayor and a mayoral system, you have another power structure coming up in the city. And I'm being candid about it. The third bit is you talked of, yes, the resource allocation can happen, but the citizens must plan where it gets utilized. If you go into how municipalities are structured, by structure you have the Metropolitan Planning Committee, which is actually citizen participated. So you have all the structure, but it's not functioning. How do you plan to fix it?
Shall I? First of all, I hope everybody in this room, first of all, appreciates that this warped logic, which we hear very, very often, and I hope McKinsey doesn't subscribe to that, sir, that if a city gives 90% of the revenue or even 65%, then it's entitled to get 65% of that revenue back. I mean, I'm just saying that this I hear very often, that our city gives so much, so we should get more revenue. This is ridiculous. There's a nation of 1 billion plus people. There's need for resources, particularly to meet the needs of the poor, the marginalized sections of societies, those who live in areas or who have not got the opportunity to board the train, like many of us have. So I personally don't look at a tax that I pay as some favor I'm doing to the system. I get more from the country than what I pay as taxes, or any of us pays as taxes. And really, when we evade taxes also, one must keep in mind that we may be snatching a LPG connection from a poor, or quality health care for a poor person in a village, forcing somebody to carry his mother on his back for 15, 20 kilometers to reach nearest health care. So I think, first of all, the fact that tax collection and from where it comes and where it's deployed, I don't see a direct correlation. City taxes, of course, are used in the city. So Mumbai Corporation collects its taxes, it uses it in the city. Second, cities are working to solve their problems, albeit differently. So we have a city like, we have a chief minister in Maharashtra, Devendra Fadnavis, who's really proactively working to set the mobile mothers the transport system right, who's working to create a web of metros, a web of roads, who's finally got Trans-Harbour Link going, who's getting the airport started, and the Honorable Prime Minister will be doing that on the 18th, doing the honors on the 18th, to get the airport, new airport started in Navi Mumbai. He's working to see if can we get one terminal building and one runway up and about in 2 years. Never before kind of targets. You know, 50% of India's infrastructure spending today is happening in Maharashtra, as per a Deutsche Bank report. So things are happening. Now each city is working differently. I don't want to give a political hue to it, but if you come from Bangalore, the people elected a particular party, gave them the maximum number of seats, but two other parties decided to get together and keep them out of government and took over the role of the mayor and the city government in Bangalore. And then we are seeing what's happening in Bangalore day in and day out. Okay, and it was left to us then to provide a suburban network there and provide the facilities to unclog the roads of Bangalore, because it's really becoming unlivable, 2 hours to go from one place to the other in Bangalore. So to my mind, things are happening. Instead of being cynical, which I think over a period of time all of us have learned to become very well, we'll all need to participate. We'll all need to be conscious. We'll all need to raise our voice. And raise our voice again, not in a cynical fashion. So we have a page in a newspaper which will only talk about the potholes on the road. But why don't we also start engaging with what's happening when the work is happening? Why don't we all start also seeing some good stories? Very often good stories encourage more people to be involved in the process. Good stories help us learn what can be done better. So I think it's time that we as a nation, particularly those of us in the Oberoi today, and I believe we are a privileged set of society in this country, starts getting more concerned rather than all the time cribbing about what's happening. No offense meant to you, sir, personally. To any other question you had more?
We are deeply engaged. I was not being cynical. As a matter of fact, like Jamshedpur, Electronic City is an autonomous independent township. It's one of its kind. It's an urban local body. And I chair that urban local body. So there is so much of time beyond my day job.
It's a new city, by the way. It was not there 20 years ago.
Yes.
So in a
it's
way,
just
we need
about
to have
4
these
years old.
satellite cities coming up. We need to have satellite towns. You can't wish away urbanization.
Absolutely.
We'll all have to be involved to see how it can be done better. Tell me, in this room, I'm willing to challenge how many people are concerned or have taken adequate care or made sure that their domestic help has a house of their own. With all these facilities that we are giving, loans, subsidies, this, that, how many of us have bothered to educate our domestic help that you can own a house at a very nominal cost? How many of us bother to pay minimum wages to our domestic help, to our drivers? How many of us have bothered to open a provident fund account for them or given them a Mediclaim facility or made them, they are now eligible for ESIC, which is so cheap, Employees State Insurance Corporation. Do any of us care to bother about all of that? I suspect not. Some of us must be. I'm not castigated. I'm not a cynical guy. But I believe that we can have much more good Samaritans amongst all of us.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Okay, there's a
I'm
young person there. Yes, can you please continue?
hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. I'm Rishabh Dasani. I'm a management student from MDI Gurgaon. Sir, my question is directed to Piyush sir here. Sir, does autonomous mobility in terms of public transport send people into unemployment? And if indeed the government is, sincere about following that path, doesn't it lead to a bigger problem?
Carlo and I had this conversation in Davos, and very clearly, as I said earlier on in earlier part of the discussion, every country will have to adopt to what is most essential for that country and in the context of that country's situation. So really India doesn't need driverless cars, and we discussed that at length over there in Davos. And in another occasion also, on 2 occasions. One was in our session, and there was another session on mobility that, I don't know, KPMG or PwC or somebody had put together, Deloitte or somebody, where we had Siemens and many companies participating, where we also came to the conclusion that we really need to develop our program for public transport, for mobility, for engaging with technology, for absorption of newer ideas and newer ways of working related to the Indian context. So, but at the same time, so driverless cars is really a no-no, frankly, for India. And I don't know if that driverless car will be able to factor in, you know, a sudden guy jumping and running into the street, on the street. I have my doubts about that. Having said that, I was one of those who actually in one such engagement, you know, electric vehicles, Anand, I don't know if you're aware, the story didn't start out of any great public consultations or any research paper from Mahindra's or anybody else.
I know the story.
We were at an Overdrive award.
Yeah.
I was giving away awards, and then, I mean, we have to give these speeches and I don't come with text, so I have to just, I keep roving thoughts on the podium. And I just articulated, I said, I frankly dream of the day. And I was power minister, I was trying to find a market for power. We were a power surplus nation now. Finally, 70 years after independence, we finally become power surplus. So I was looking for a market really. I had a vested interest in that indirectly. But I was just back from Paris after the Paris negotiation. Or maybe it was just before that, one of the two. And I just rovingly said that, you know, I dream of a day that by 2030, every car sold in India is an electric vehicle. And can we not take a leadership position? Do we always have to wait for the world to progress and then India will copy and follow suit many years later? And from there, look where we've taken this.
At Mahindra, we have absolutely nothing against your roving mind. Keep it roving.
Carlo, since you've had many conversations with the minister, what is your thought on this? What kind of cars are suitable for the India market in future? What will work?
Well, let me say in general, I think something quite exciting is that we're going to see many new form factors for cars. And if you think about a car of the 20th century, because you owned it, then you had to size it based on the peak. The peak was, you know, a family is usually 4 or 5 people, and the peak was when the whole family would go to the mountains, would go on holidays, so you needed a 5-seater or, you know, a 7-seater, but you had that because it was something you owned and you had to buy it so that in the worst case scenario, there would be the car that would fit you. Now that you're thinking much more about mobility on demand, as we heard in the McKinsey presentation and so on, then that's most likely going to change. And I think, you know, 2 ways of changing. You know, one is, can you think about much smaller vehicles? As we said before, usually it's, you know, 1.6 people in the vehicle. So there's no reason to have, you know, something very big. There's no reason to move tons of steel just, you know, to carry like 100 kilograms or so. So which is what happens today. So I think, you know, on one side, we're going to see many more smaller vehicles. On the other side, I think we're going to see some collective vehicles. So something where you go like a 10-seater, an 8-seater, and that thing is going to be like a shared taxi, as we saw before, that will give you a lift, and then, you know, you will share a ride with somebody else and so on. So in this thing, which is happening right now, so we're seeing more and more form factors being explored, and I think we'll see much more of this in the next few years. Then I think India has a very interesting role to play, because then you can see what are exactly the form factor that satisfy best the road conditions here, the families, and so on. So I think in this is going to be quite exciting, and I'm sure we're going to see some very unique solutions coming out of India here.
Thank you. I think, again, as I said, there are many more questions, but we have run out of time. When you have such an engaging discussion, young friend, we will take your questions some other day. When you do a compelling conversation, and when you have people who are not only visionaries but have the intent and the power of actioning, this is what happens. We run out of time. But then we learn some and we realize there's so much to take away and move on. So thank you again once more. It was really personally very, very motivating for me. So on to many more cities and on to a better future. Thank you.
So Sangeeta, will you do the mementos for the minister and Mr. Mahindra and Carlo? Carlo's already got one.